You think you know what fear is? What it's like to face something that doesn't belong to this world? Well, let me tell you. Fear has a new name, and that name is her. The night was thick with a silence that felt heavier than the weight of the sky itself. In the small, dim-lit room, Ethan's breath came in shallow gasps, his heart racing faster than he'd ever felt it before. He had no idea how he'd gotten here, why he was here, or what kind of nightmare he'd stumbled into. But one thing was certain. He wasn't alone. From the shadows, she emerged. Her eyes gleamed like twin moons, cold and distant, yet full of an ancient hunger. She was beautiful, too beautiful. It almost hurt to look at her. Her skin, pale and flawless, glistened with an otherworldly sheen. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, cascading over her shoulders in waves that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. But it wasn't her appearance that had Ethan frozen in place. It was the feeling that something in the world had been turned upside down, and in that moment, he wasn't sure if he was the prey, or something far worse. You're not human," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. He wasn't sure whether he wanted an answer, or if he just needed to confirm his worst fear. She didn't smile. In fact, her expression remained unreadable. But there was a flicker in her eyes, a cold, calculating gleam. "You're right. But I'm far worse than what you can imagine," she replied, her voice soft, like velvet, but with a dangerous edge. A chill ran down his spine. And then, before he could react, she was closer, faster than any human should be. He barely saw her move, but the sensation of her presence was undeniable, suffocating. "You can't hide from me," she continued. "Not now, not ever. You awakened something in me when you crossed my path. Something ancient. Something dark." Ethan swallowed hard, the words hanging in the air. She wasn't just a creature. She wasn't just a vampire. She was something else. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice shaking now. Her eyes narrowed, locking onto him with an intensity that sent his heart into overdrive. "Your blood, your life." But not just that. She leaned in, closer still, and Ethan felt his breath catch in his throat. She placed a hand on his chest, just over his heart, and he could feel the heat radiating from her touch. But there was something wrong, something unsettling about it. He could feel his own pulse thudding in his ears, louder and louder. "Something more," she whispered. "Something you don't even know you have yet. I will take it, and when I do, everything will change." Ethan's mind raced. What was she talking about? Why him? And what was it about his blood that had caught her interest? Before he could ask, the world around them seemed to shift. The walls of the room flickered, as if they were mere shadows, as if they were illusions. Then came a sound that rattled his bones, voices, low and guttural, from the dark corners of the room. There were others. "You've made a dangerous choice, girl," a voice boomed from the shadows, unmistakably alien in nature. "Do you think you can just take what's ours?" The girl's grip tightened around Ethan's chest, and for a moment, the world went silent again. Then she smiled, a wicked, dangerous smile. "You have no idea what I've become, and what they will never be able to stop." The sound of footsteps grew closer, heavy, deliberate. Ethan couldn't see their source, but he could feel it in the air. There were others like her. Aliens, vampires, a hybrid of nightmare and fantasy come to life. Ethan's thoughts raced as the room seemed to close in on him. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was something much bigger than a single human life. This was the beginning of something dark. The girl's hand slid down his chest, closer to his heart. "I'll make sure you live through this, Ethan. But you'll wish you didn't." Ethan's heartbeat hammered in his chest as her grip tightened. He could feel her breath against his neck, icy cold, yet burning with a strange, consuming heat. The space around them seemed to blur, as if reality itself was bending to her will. She tilted her head, studying him like a predator eyeing its prey. But there was something else in her gaze. It wasn't just hunger, it was recognition, something he couldn't understand. "You're different," she muttered, her voice barely a whisper. "There's more to you than I realized." Ethan tried to pull away, his mind scrambling for a way out, but his body refused to obey. It felt as though his limbs were made of stone, frozen in place by an unseen force. He could feel her power surging, like a current of electricity flowing through the air, zapping the life from him. But then, just as quickly as it had come, the pressure eased. She stepped back, her cold eyes never leaving his. Her expression had softened, though the hunger remained, a thirst that had yet to be quenched. "I won't kill you. Not yet," she said with a faint smirk. "But you're about to become part of something much bigger. And believe me, you're going to want to be on my side." The words hung in the air like a warning, but they didn't give him the sense of safety he hoped for. Instead, they raised the hairs on the back of his neck. He needed answers. He had to know who, or what she was. "What do you mean?" His voice came out rough, hoarse from the pressure she'd put on him earlier. "What is this? Why me?" Her eyes flickered with something dangerous, a mix of amusement and mystery. "Why you? Oh, Ethan, you have no idea how special you are. Your blood, your genetic signature, it's different from the others. I'm not the only one who's taken notice." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He wasn't just some random person. His blood, his DNA. Was that why she'd come for him? What did she mean by genetic signature? But before he could ask more, a deep growl echoed from the shadows, cutting through the tension in the room. "Enough, Tessa." The voice was low, guttural, with an alien rasp. "You're wasting your time. He's just a human." Tessa, the girl, turned toward the source of the voice. Her gaze hardened, and for the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of something other than confidence in her eyes. Fear? Regret? He couldn't tell. "Just a human?" Tessa spat, her voice dripping with venom. "I've heard enough of that. You don't know what I've found. You don't understand what I've become." From the darkness, 3 figures emerged, stepping into the dim light. They were taller than any human, their features angular, almost insectoid. Their eyes gleamed with an unnatural glow, strange colors shifting from silver to green to black. They didn't look entirely alien, not in the traditional sense. They had humanoid forms, but there was something deeply unsettling about them, as if they didn't belong here. "They're here for a reason." One of them spoke, his voice like a whisper in the wind, both terrifying and calming. His skin shimmered faintly, as though it was made of some kind of liquid metal. "And you're not the only one with plans for him." Ethan's mind raced. These creatures, these aliens, weren't just some random beings from another world. They were part of something much larger, something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. He was caught in the middle of it, and there was no easy way out. Tessa stepped closer to him again, her hand brushing his cheek, a soft, almost affectionate gesture. But there was no warmth in her touch. It was cold, calculated. "Don't worry, Ethan," she said softly. "I'm not going to let them take you. Not yet. We have work to do." Work? What kind of work could she possibly be talking about? And why was he involved in it? "You think you can protect him?" One of the alien figures snarled. His skin pulsed with energy, and the air around him seemed to crackle with power. "You're nothing but a rogue, Tessa. You've turned your back on us for the last time." Tessa's eyes narrowed, and for the briefest moment, Ethan saw a flicker of something fierce, something protective in her gaze. Was she really trying to protect him? "You don't understand," she hissed, her voice cold and filled with resolve. "You can't stop this now. It's already begun." The 3 aliens exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. They were debating something, but Ethan had no idea what. And he was starting to feel like the world he knew, the one he thought was real, was slipping away from him. "What has begun?" Ethan asked, his voice shaking. "What's happening to me?" Tessa didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped back, her eyes lingering on him, as if considering something. Finally, she spoke. "There's more to your blood than you realize," she said. "It holds the key to a power greater than anything you've ever imagined. And I'm not the only one who's come for it. There are others, much worse, who will stop at nothing to get what's inside you. But I'm different. I can protect you. I can help you unlock your potential." Ethan felt his heart race again, the fear crawling back into his chest. What did she mean by unlocking his potential? Was he in danger? What did they want with him, with his blood? Why me? He whispered, desperate to understand. Tessa's gaze softened for a moment, but the coldness never left her voice. Because you're the last of your kind, she said. You carry something inside you that no one else can replicate. Something they've been hunting for centuries. The words hit him like a tidal wave. The last of his kind? What was she talking about? Before he could ask another question, one of the alien figures stepped forward, his face twisted with a mix of anger and frustration. Enough games, Tessa, the alien growled. This human has no place in your schemes. He's not ready. But Tessa wasn't listening anymore. Her attention was solely focused on Ethan. Her eyes filled with a strange mix of pity and something else, something darker. You're more than just human, Ethan, she said quietly, her voice like a promise. And one day, you'll understand why they've all come for you. As the tension in the room thickened, Ethan felt the world shift again. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about a truth that was far bigger than anything he could comprehend. And whether he was ready or not, that truth was about to change everything. As the tension in the room grew, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was at stake, something far beyond his control. Tessa's words echoed in his mind. You're the last of your kind. The weight of her declaration pressed down on him. But what kind was she talking about? What was so special about his blood? The three alien figures seemed to loom over him, their eyes glowing with silent hostility. Their presence made the air thick, suffocating. Every time one of them shifted, it felt as if the room itself trembled. But Tessa stood firm between him and the alien beings, her eyes narrowed, prepared for whatever came next. Do you think you can protect him? One of the figures spat, his voice dripping with disdain. You're weak, Tessa. You've let emotions cloud your judgment. And now, he's a liability. Tessa's lips curled into a thin smile, a dangerous glint in her eyes. You still don't understand. Ethan isn't just a liability. He's the key. The key to everything we've been fighting for. The alien figures exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Ethan's heart was racing, but he still had so many questions. He needed answers, and he needed them now. What's going on? What do you want with me? Tessa glanced back at him, her expression softening just for a moment. It's not just about blood. It's about power, about control, about the future of everything you've ever known. She took a step closer to him, her eyes locked onto his. And Ethan, you've already unlocked a part of it. What do you mean? His voice was barely a whisper. A soft, almost wistful smile tugged at Tessa's lips. Your blood, it's not just human. It's hybrid. There's a piece of something ancient, something far more powerful inside you. It's what I've been searching for. It's what they've been searching for. Ethan felt his stomach churn with confusion and fear. Hybrid? What did that even mean? Before he could ask more, the silence was shattered by a loud, mechanical noise, a screeching, grinding sound. The walls around them seemed to shift, and the room pulsed with an unnatural energy. Ethan looked around, panic rising in his chest. What was happening? Tessa's gaze darted around, her hand instinctively reaching for Ethan's arm. It's them, she whispered. They found us. One of the alien figures, the one who had spoken the most, stepped forward, his voice trembling with urgency. We can't let them take him. Not yet. If they do, it's over for all of us. Suddenly, the entire room shook, and the lights flickered out. In the pitch-black darkness, Ethan felt a new presence. Something immense, something alien. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the space, sending waves of dread crashing over him. We're not alone, the alien growled. Tessa's grip on his arm tightened. We have to move. Now. She pulled Ethan toward the back of the room, and as they ran, the alien figures followed closely behind. The darkness seemed to swallow them whole, and for a moment, Ethan couldn't tell where the walls ended and the air began. Every step felt like it could be his last, but Tessa was moving faster than he could comprehend. She was different, stronger, faster, more determined. She was something else. Ethan tried to catch his breath as they reached a hidden door at the back of the room. Tessa's fingers worked quickly, unlocking the door with an expert hand. She glanced at him, her eyes burning with intensity. "They're coming for us," she said, her voice low but filled with certainty. "And we have no choice but to fight back." Before Ethan could respond, a blinding light flooded the room, and a figure stepped forward, taller, darker, more imposing than anything he had seen so far. The figure was shrouded in shadow, his face obscured, but the air around him vibrated with power. "Enough games, Tessa," the figure said, his voice like the hum of a deep, resonating drum. "You've had your fun, but it's time to end this." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The air felt thick with tension, the very fabric of reality trembling with every word. The unknown figure reached toward Tessa, his hand glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. Tessa stepped forward, her voice filled with both defiance and pain. "You think you can control me? You think you can control him?" she spat. "You don't know what he is. You don't know what's inside him." The figure's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. Ethan felt something shift within him, something deep, ancient, powerful. It was as if his very blood had come alive, as if it were responding to the energy in the room. A surge of warmth spread through his veins, and suddenly, he felt different. The figure sneered, sensing the change. "So, it's begun. You've awakened it. Now you'll have to deal with the consequences." Tessa moved to stand beside Ethan, her eyes flashing with something that could only be described as determination. "We won't go down without a fight." Ethan didn't understand what was happening, but as he looked at the alien figure before him, he felt something surge inside him. His blood, his very DNA, was fighting back. The transformation was happening. Before the figure could react, a blast of energy shot out from Ethan's chest, a force of light so powerful that it sent the figure flying backward. Ethan collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by the sheer power coursing through him. Tessa rushed to his side, her expression a mixture of awe and concern. "You did it. You actually did it?" Ethan could barely comprehend what had just happened. "What did I do?" he gasped, his breath coming in ragged bursts. "You unlocked it," she replied softly. "You're more than just a human. You're the bridge between us, the key to everything." The remaining alien figures looked on in horror, their faces twisted in disbelief. They had underestimated him. They had underestimated his blood. "We've made a mistake," one of the aliens muttered under his breath. "It's too late. The transformation is complete." The room trembled again, but this time, it wasn't fear that filled the air. It was the pulse of a new beginning. Ethan had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back. The enemies, the aliens who had hunted him, they were no longer the predators. He was, and he would fight to protect what was his. The alien forces regrouped, but it was clear to everyone in the room. This battle was no longer about survival. It was about control. It was about power. And Ethan, with his newfound abilities, was the key to winning. Tessa stood tall beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder as they both prepared for the final showdown. "Ready?" she asked. Ethan nodded, his heart calm despite the chaos around him. "Ready." The transformation was complete, and the fight for their survival had only just begun.